Hello and welcome. Tonight, over 280 inmates escaped from the Maiduguri medium custodial centers as the federal government begins to evacuate residents of the affected communities in the flood that has ravaged the Borno state capital. The NCDC raises fears about an increase in the number of cholera cases coming weeks due to flooding in some parts of the country. Confirms 8 new cases of Mpox, bringing the number of cases in the country to 67. And a federal high court sitting in Abuja grants 10 million naira bail on each of the 10 members of the End Bad Governance protesters who were charged with attempt to overthrow President Bola Tinubu between August the 1st and 4th this year.
On business news, federal government raises over $900 million in first of its kind domestic US dollar bond.
On sports news tonight, 4-time Grand Slam champion Carlos Alcaraz leads Spain to Davis Cup victory over Czech Republic in Valencia.
And from the nation's capital, the federal government gets set to commence the implementation of the National Values Charter, an initiative which aims to instill the right values, attitudes, and perspectives in the hearts and minds of all Nigerians.
And in international news from London, President Joe Biden has hinted at Washington lifting restrictions on Ukraine using US long-range missiles against Russia.
Thousands of families trapped in the flooded areas of Maiduguri are being evacuated to safer locations by the military, volunteers, and security agencies. Meanwhile, the Minister of Interior, Olubomi Tunji-Ojo, toured the custom area and other severely affected regions. Additionally, the Borno State Governor, Babagana Zulum, reported that over 1 million people have been affected by the flood.
Governor Babagana Zulum is at the Bakassi camp along the Bio Damboa Road to distribute relief materials to the victims of the flood devastation which affected the state capital, Maiduguri. Armed with the 3 billion naira flood intervention from the federal government, the governor donates cash, food items, and other necessities to the victims. He also gives an update on the situation.
So far, so good. We have mobilized cooks, and they have started cooking food in this camp. So these are immediate palliative measures that will cushion their immediate effect. So this morning, what we are here is to distribute the sum of 10,000 naira to each and every heads of household that are affected by floods. And I also want to inform you that a few days ago, luckily enough, we received 3 billion naira from the federal government as flood intervention fund. So we are using this fund to support the communities that are affected by the flood.
The governor explains the cause of the flood and the plans of the state to reconstruct the dam and contain the water.
The water that we received this year exceeds the carrying capacity of the dam. We have a very heavy storm. It might be associated with climate change. That's the most important thing. So what we need to do is to now reinforce the dam, reconstruct the dam, expand the capacity of the dam, and most importantly, defilt the drains. Because most of the waterways were occupied by human beings. If you can remember a few years ago when I was sworn in as the governor of Borno State, I followed all this route and I asked people to bucket on the waterways. But unfortunately, people don't heed to our own advice.
Families affected by the flood are being evacuated to safer grounds by the military and other security agencies.
Don't come back with this your motor here. Back properly now.
The flood is already receding in some parts of Maiduguri, while some places like the Medium Security Correctional Center is still flooded. The Minister of Interior, Mr. Olubunmi Tunji Ojo, accompanied by heads of paramilitary agencies, inspects the facility to assess the situation. Later, he pays a courtesy visit to Governor Zulum, where he gives updates on the impact of the flood.
It's a sad moment, and we empathize with the people of Borno. And of course, the government is very much concerned. And in terms of our facilities, the correctional center, actions are presently ongoing. There are certain things I won't be able to disclose for at now because of security reasons. But you can be sure that we're on top of situations, 100%. The immigration passport office was affected, but the people of Borno can be rest assured that once we get back to Abuja, we will try as soon as possible with immediate effect to create another center, where they can start their normal activities. And of course, the fire service was also affected, but all this are just, to me, they are minor issues compared to the generality of the impact of the flood, on the people of Borno.
The state government plans to set up a committee to look into the possible outbreak of the disease. Nevertheless, search and rescue operation continue in parts of the state capital.
Vice President Kashim Shettima says the federal government will partner governments of the 36 states in addressing the ecological challenges confronting the country. He stated this when he received the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Tajuddin Abbas, who was at the presidential villa, to commiserate with him over the flood disaster ravaging Borno State. The Vice President described the flood situation in Maiduguri and other parts of the country as a national calamity which requires the cooperation of all stakeholders. During the meeting, the Speaker assures the nation that the National Assembly will partner the presidency in providing support to communities affected by the flood and ensure that succor gets to those directly affected by flood disasters, not just in Borno State, but in other parts of the country.
Very sorry, Your Excellency, for what has happened. We share your pains, we share your concerns. We are together in this from the beginning to the end. We shall allow it to come to pass and people will go back to their normal lives and businesses as if it has not happened. Because we and you will make sure that we provide all the pilots needed for them to actually regain their means of livelihood. Thank you, Excellency. Please convey our sincere concerns to the governor and to the people of Borno.
In the meantime, the United Nations has raised an alarm over the possibility of an outbreak of cholera disease at internally displaced persons camps in Maiduguri, Borno State, as a result of the reported flooding in the state. A report released by the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs says the immediate needs are food, protection, shelter, and clean water, adding that some water sources are contaminated and could lead to outbreaks of diseases such as cholera. According to the UN, beyond MMC and Jere local government areas in Borno State, the Dalwa community in Damboa local government is also affected, with Bama and Gwoza local governments similarly reporting flooding. Now, the UN adds that before the recent flash floods, almost 123,000 people in Borno were affected by floods and windstorms since August, adding that the floods have destroyed critical infrastructure and heightened the risk of disease outbreaks, especially in overcrowded IDP camps. Meanwhile, the Minister of Environment, Balarabe Lawal, is asking for immediate collective action to address the effects of climate change, which has led to heavier than normal rainfall and further environmental degradation. A statement issued by the minister describes the Alo Dam flooding as unfortunate and a heartbreaking tragedy which has severely affected several communities, causing displacement and property damage. The minister adds that his ministry is working closely with the Borno State government and relevant agencies to provide support and bring succor to affected communities, and urges all relevant stakeholders responsible for recovery efforts to join government in this endeavor. The Nigeria Center for Disease Control and Prevention has confirmed 8 new cases of Mpox in the country, bringing the number of cases in the country to 67. The Director General of the center, Dr. Jide Idris, disclosed this during the media briefing in Abuja. However, Dr. Idris is concerned that the number of cholera cases may surge in the coming weeks due to the floods in some parts of the country. Also, the NCDC is warning the general public against the misuse of antimicrobial resistance pandemic, which has 263,000 deaths associated with it so far. Our correspondent Kumbi Abuluade tells us more.
Top officials of the Nigerian Center for Disease Control are providing an update on the various disease outbreaks in the country. Currently, the agency has confirmed 8 new cases of Mpox, with fresh cases recorded in Gombe, Plateau and Akwa Ibom states, totaling the number of confirmed cases to 67 out of 1,031 suspected cases from 35 states and the FCT. For cholera, 141 suspected cases and 1 death have been recorded in Katsina, Lagos, Jigawa and Adamawa states, bringing the number of suspected cases to 7,663. Additionally, there are 7,703 suspected cases of Lassa fever, with 168 deaths so far, while diphtheria has 12 new cases, putting the confirmed number of cases at 7,784 since 2024.
These are key issues here.
However, the Director General of the Center is raising alarm that there could be a surge in the outbreak of cholera as well as cerebrospinal meningitis.
Fewer states now are reporting cases of cholera, but we should not rest on our oars because 1, we still have the rainy seasons, and 2, remember the flood. Lassa fever is on the decline, meningitis is on the decline because we have been advised to deactivate the EOC. But again, we also know that these things are seasonal, and very soon they will start coming up. We're expecting Lassa fever to be on the rise again in the next couple of weeks. Meningitis again will peak again towards the beginning of next year. These are vaccine-preventable diseases, and the message basically now is that we must ensure that our children are vaccinated, or the people are vaccinated at appropriate times again.
The center provides an update on the evaluation of antimicrobial resistance, which is considered a pandemic.
Antimicrobial resistance is a situation that arises when the germs we know about, that is the bacteria, the viruses, and the parasites, no longer respond to the medicines we need to take to treat them. And it's a problem because what it means is that common infections will become difficult to treat. And the numbers show now that if we don't do anything, antimicrobial resistance is surpassing malaria, HIV, and TB.
The NCDC further warns the public to desist from the misuse of antibiotics. Kumbi Aboluade, Channels Television News.
In part 2 after the break, a federal high court in Abuja grants 10 million naira bail on each of the 10 members of the End Bad Governance protesters who were charged with attempts to overthrow between August 1st and 4th this year. Please stay with us. Welcome back. If you've just joined us, you're watching the news at 10 on Channels Television, broadcasting live from Lagos. A reminder of our top stories. Over 280 inmates escape from the Maiduguri medium custodial centers as federal government begins to evacuate residents of the affected communities in the flood that has ravaged the Borno state capital. The NCDC raises fears about an increase in the number of cholera cases in the coming weeks due to flooding in some parts of the country, confirms 8 new cases of Mpox, bringing the number of cases in the country to 67. The Federal High Court sitting in Abuja grants 10 million naira bail on each of the 10 members of the End Bad Governance protesters who were charged with attempt to overthrow President Bola Tinubu between August 1st and 4th this year. And President Joe Biden has hinted at Washington lifting restrictions on Ukraine using U.S. long-range missiles against Russia. The federal government is pledging $2 million in the fight against cancer through the Health Intervention Investment of the Nigeria Sovereign Investment Authority. The Chief Investment Officer of the agency, Mr. Kola Owodunni, made the revelation at the Oncology Summit in Abuja. Our correspondent, Dele Omoyeni, reports.
It's the second edition of the Oncology Summit, organized by the Nigerian Sovereign Investment Authority, NSIA, with the theme, Enhancing the Oncology Workforce in Nigeria. Those in attendance include local and global industry experts and policymakers. The goal of this year's summit is to discuss advancements in oncology care and treatment in Nigeria. The federal government is calling for a global collaboration to find a cure for the disease.
We have to be part of a world effort. We have to be part of clinical trials. And as we've heard, this is not something that you do alone. It takes a global effort.
We do know that at least 500,000 jobs can be created over the next 10 years just on the basis of clinical research, because the capabilities that are here in Nigeria and the population that we have, latching on with the global expertise, the pharma industry and others, we can build a win-win model.
The call for collaboration resonates with the Chief Investment Officer of the NSIA, Mr. Kola Owodunni, and the keynote speaker, Dr. Bob Lee. They agree that increased funding for clinical trials is the only way to get a breakthrough in the race for a cure.
As part of our commitment to this cause, the NSIA has made tremendous strides in the field of oncology, notably through the establishment of the NSIA Youth Cancer Center.
This is the sort of trial that generates a lot of funding, will pay for staff, pay for nurses, coordinators, research assistants, salaries of physicians, and then you get the surplus to reinvest in capacity building.
For the chairman of the House of Representatives Committee on Health, cancer treatment must be available and affordable for all Nigerians.
So we were trying to look at, with more funds coming, we are looking at in the next operation going up, we increase the amount, and we may get to a point whereby almost every cancer patient will be able to enjoy some sort of a relief from the federal government.
At today's summit, several recommendations were made on how to fight the scourge of cancer, but key among them is the pledge by the NSIA to donate $2 million to training healthcare professionals in the treatment of cancer over the next 2 years. Dele Omoyeni for Channels Television News.
The governor of Edo State, Godwin Obaseki, says the ruling People's Democratic Party might not sign the peace accord for political parties involved in the September the 21st governorship election in Edo State. Governor Obaseki, who bared his mind to the chairman of the National Peace Committee, General Abdulsalami Abubakar, during a courtesy visit at the government house, queried the safety of the PDP. He alleged that over 60 warrants had been secured for the arrest of PDP leaders. General Abubakar said he was in town to ensure that the political parties in the state commit to a peaceful governorship poll.
So, Excellency, the purpose of the Peace Committee coming to Edo State is, I'm sure you must be aware, there is going to be a signing of peace accord between the gubernatorial candidates and the parties. That is to ensure that there is no mudslinging during the campaign, and then we accept the results as long as it is free and fair. And also, if there is any misgivings, the court should be abide time.
The IG's office came in and obtained warrants to arrest 60 PDP supporters. 60.
60.
Yes, they have the warrants. So all just essentially driving all our leaders into hiding. And for me, my role as the chief security officer is being made nonsense of by the IG. Because the commission arrests, we heard somebody was arrested, the chairman was arrested. I called the commissioner. I said, please, I understand this has happened. Please look into it and let me know. He said, I'll come back to you, sir. And he just refused, he ignored me, didn't say anything. It was the next morning at 4 a.m. he moved that person to Abuja. And as I speak, they are all there. So, sir, how can we sign a peace accord? Why should we? Because clearly what they're saying is it's going to be a very violent election. And they're going to use the forces of coercion and intimidation to win the elections in Edo, whether we like it or not. That's the message. I have the IG in town who said no until everybody arrested in Edo is released or brought back to Edo to be tried for whatever offenses you claim they've committed. We have no confidence that the police is going to protect us in these elections.
Meanwhile, 35,000 police officers and additional 8,000 security personnel other than the police have been deployed to provide cover for the conduct of the Edo State governorship election on September the 21st. Inspector General of Police Kayode Egbetukun stated this at the stakeholders meeting in Benin City, the Edo State capital. The police boss also warns all those planning to engage the services of private or state security outfits for the election to drop such plans or risk a fight with the police.
The Inspector General of Police arrives at the Victor Uwaifo's Event Center in Benin City, along with the chairman of the Independent National Electoral Commission, some INEC national commissioners, and officials of the Department of State Service. Their arrival signals the commencement of the Edo State governorship election stakeholders meeting, which is well attended by leaders of political parties and their candidates for the September 21 election.
I was here in 2020. And by God's grace,
the INEC chairman sets the tone for the day's deliberations.
The purpose of this interactive meeting is to brief political parties and candidates, as well as accredited election observers, the media, and other stakeholders on the preparations for the election. In particular, the Inspector General of Police will address us on security preparations, while I will address you on electoral preparations. And together, we will respond to issues and concerns you may wish to raise.
The Inspector General of Police then addresses the gathering on deployments and other security preparations for the election day.
In this election, the police will be deploying 35,000 personnel, and this will be complemented by over 8,000 members of the armed forces and other security agencies. In preparation for the election, the Nigerian Police Force, in collaboration with these other security agencies, has undertaken several measures, including conducting a thorough threat analysis of vulnerable points in Edo State to deploy resources effectively. We will safeguard the electoral process by ensuring the safety of all persons and properties, including equipment that will be involved in this election.
The police chief also warns against the use of private or state-owned security outfits on the election day.
I want to emphasize that the management of election security solely the responsibility of the Nigerian Police Force and other national security agencies within the ISS. This responsibility does not extend to quasi-security entities or non-state actors.
However, the state chairman of the Inter-Party Advisory Council, IPAC, makes an appeal for the political parties and the electoral umpire.
So we must try as much as possible to ensure that this election is peaceful. Of course, the national chairman of INEC has also shown by his body languages that is truly committed to a peaceful election.
18 political parties are participating in the September 21 governorship election, and as the day draws near, both the political actors, the electorate, and observer groups are hoping that the exercise will be peaceful, free, fair, and credible.
In the meantime, INEC has extended the collection of permanent voter cards in Edo State by 3 days, beginning from Friday the 13th to Sunday the 15th of this month. Now, the Commission made the extension owing to demands by political parties at the Edo governorship election stakeholders meeting, which held at the Victor Uwaifo Event Center in Benin City, the Edo State capital. Now, the meeting, which was well attended by candidates and political party leaders, unanimously appealed to the Commission to consider an extension of the period for the collection of the PVCs for a few days to enable more voters collect their cards. Meanwhile, the electoral umpire is appealing to all registered voters in Edo State that are yet to collect their PVCs to make use of the opportunity of the extension and collect their cards. Still ahead on the news at 10, the federal government raises over $900 million in first-of-its-kind domestic US dollar bond. That will be on Business News. Please join us again. Welcome back to the news at 10. Let's now head to the nation's capital, where Terry Kumi is standing by to give us the very latest from our Abuja studios. Hello, Terry. Over to you.
Hello, Ayo. Nice to see you. Now, the Court of Appeal sitting in Abuja has dismissed an appeal filed by Mr. Kenneth Imaswagbon, seeking to disqualify Mr. Olumide Akpata as the governorship candidate of the Labour Party in the September 21st governorship election in Edo State. In the lead judgment delivered by Justice Okonabang, the appellate court held, among others, that Mr. Imaswagbon failed to explore intra-conflict resolution mechanism of the Labour Party before rushing to court. The court also held that his case was premature in law and cannot be entertained. The unanimous judgment of the three-man panel of justices also held that Mr. Imaswagbon failed to tender the disputed results of the February 23rd primary election of the party, which he claimed to have won. This judgment comes a day after the Labour Party presidential candidate in the last general election, Mr. Peter Obi, told the electorate in Edo State that they can create a better Nigeria by voting the party's candidate in the Edo governorship poll.
The court has just delivered a judgment on appeal challenging the decision of the trial court in Benin. Principally, one of our ground of appeal is that the court did not make any pronouncement on the arguments in respect of motion and motion taken by parties for which judgment was reserved. And so it formed part of our principal ground of appeal that no pronouncement was made on argument taken by parties in respect of an application taken out by the first respondent, Olumide Akpata. We will go and study this judgment and then take our informed decision on that.
A federal high court sitting in Abuja has slammed a 10 million naira bill on each of the 10 end-bad governance protesters who were charged with an attempt to overthrow President Bola Tinubu between August the 1st and 4th this year. Justice Emeka Nwite, while delivering the ruling in the bail applications, said the protesters must produce sureties who must be property owners in Abuja and must deposit documents of their properties to the court, in addition to swearing to affidavit of means. The court equally ordered the defendants to produce one surety each who are based in Abuja and must be willing to deposit their international passports and 3 recent passport photographs with the court. Justice Nwite, while rejecting the objections of the Inspector General of Police against the bail applications, however, ordered the defendants not to participate in any public rally throughout their trial. The judge also ordered the defendants to be remanded in prison custody pending the perfection of their bail conditions. The accused persons are said to have committed treasonable offense during the 1-week nationwide protests when they allegedly levied war against Nigeria. The court has fixed the 27th of September for the commencement of trial. Meanwhile, the Federal High Court sitting in Abuja and presided over by Justice Emeka Nwite has rescheduled the hearing of the bail application of Mr. Isaac Bristol to September the 17th this year. The hearing of the bail application was originally slated for today, the 11th of this month, but was postponed. The defendant, represented by his attorney, Deji Adeyanju, had appeared in court and announced his appearance, but Justice Emeka Nwite did not hear the bail application as planned. Isaac Bristol is standing trial for alleged terrorism, money laundering, cybercrime, and illegally accessing classified documents. Away from the courts now, the federal government is set to commence the implementation of the National Values Charter. The Minister of Information and National Orientation, Mr. Mohammed Idris, announced this during the management retreat of the National Orientation Agency in Abuja. Mr. Idris adds that the charter, which is a flagship initiative of his ministry, aims to instill the right values, attitudes and perspectives in the hearts and minds of all Nigerians.
The extended management retreat of the National Orientation Agency is looking at how the mandate of the agency aligns with the Renewed Hope program of the federal government. The Minister of Information and National Orientation declares the retreat open. He announces the plan to unveil the National Values Charter, which contains the fundamental commitment of the government and the governed.
The National Values Charter, one of the flagship initiatives of the Ministry of Information and National Orientation through the National Orientation Agency, has been carefully crafted and designed to accomplish two primary objectives. One, to ensure that all Nigerians are fully aware of their rights and protections under the Constitution and the laws of the land, and that governments at all levels are equally aware of all the constitutionally guaranteed obligations that they have to the citizenry. The first goal is encapsulated in the 7 core promises of the Charter. Second, to sensitize and awaken all Nigerians to all of our responsibilities as citizens of this great and beautiful country.
Following the launch of its first artificial intelligence assistant in July, the agency is working to establish more strategies to provide citizens with access to government.
Considering the new realities, NOA has been proactive in the last 10 months, embarking on massive retooling and building on the foundation the past Director Generals laid. On July 1st this year, we launched NOA's Artificial Intelligence Voice and Chat Assistant called CLEAN. CLEAN is an innovative solution to the challenges posed by the new media landscape. It is an acronym for NOA's thematic activities on crime, lawlessness, health, education, environment, abuse, and nationalism.
The National Orientation Agency says it is seeking to provide a direct line of communication between the government and its citizens in order to foster unity and development.
Well, that's all from the nation's capital. Back to you, Ayo.
Terry. The federal government has reaffirmed its commitment to boost the production and productivity levels in the livestock subsector, which is expected to contribute to food availability and affordability. The Director of Animal Health, Clinical Services at the Ministry of Agriculture and Food Security, Dr. Musa Inuwa, explains that there is a need to maximize the production and reproductive levels of the livestock resource of the country, which can be achieved through efficient and strategic animal disease prevention and control.
As we are now currently, the gene pool of Nigerian livestock is a bit poor. Like I said earlier in my speech, you find a cow in Nigeria giving you only 3 liters of milk in the wet season. If you go to other climes, let's even say to African climes, not even developed world, you get about 15, 20 liters per day per cow for 300 days in a year. But ours, in the dry season, you don't even get even 1 liter. They dry them off because of poor nutrition and then poor gene pool. So this workshop will sensitize stakeholders on the need to imbibe the spirit of improving the gene pool of our livestock species. We are all waiting for government to make further pronouncements. What we are sure of, the President has announced that they are going to create a new Ministry of Livestock Development in order to encourage livestock production in the country and reduce farmer-herder conflicts and let livestock start contributing above 5% GDP to the nation. It's something we can harness. There are countries that are dependent on livestock resources as their mainstay of economy. But here it's only oil. So we want livestock to contribute higher. Now that they have a ministry, they have no excuse not to perform.
Business News is up next with Will Ibom.
Thank you, Ayotunde. Now, the federal government has raised over $900 million through its first ever domestic dollar bond, a landmark transaction aimed at diversifying fund sources and deepening the capital market. The bond, which was oversubscribed by over 180%, reflects strong investor confidence in Nigeria's economic outlook despite global challenges. The 5-year bond issued by the Debt Management Office DMO carries an annual coupon rate of 9.75% and will help finance critical sectors pending legislative approval. The bond attracted a broad range of investors, including Nigerian residents, non-residents, diaspora, and institutional investors, highlighting its wide appeal. The DMO says it will be listed on the Nigerian Exchange Limited (NGX) and FMDQ Securities Exchange, making it more accessible and tradable. The DMO Director General, Mrs. Patience Onia, notes that this issuance demonstrates Nigeria's commitment to leveraging its capital markets for growth. She also credits the success to key financial partners like Africa Finance Corporation, United Capital PLC, and other institutions that contributed to the transaction. The Finance Minister, Mr. Wale Edun, hails the bond as a significant achievement, emphasizing its role in supporting Nigeria's economic reforms and fiscal stability. It notes that the oversubscription and broad participation shows strong confidence in Nigeria's economic trajectory. Looking forward, Mrs. Onia highlights that the DMO will continue building on initiatives such as sovereign sukuk and green bonds to meet investors' needs and boost Nigeria's position in African capital markets. Nigeria has recorded a trade surplus of 6.95 trillion naira in the second quarter of this year, driven by strong export performance despite a slight decline in total merchandise trade. The surplus marks a 6.6% increase from the previous quarter. Exports, particularly crude oil, played a key role, with the total reaching 19.42 trillion naira, a 1.31% increase from the first quarter. Major export partners included Spain, the US, and France. Imports, however, fell to 12.47 trillion naira, a 10.71% drop from the previous quarter. China remained Nigeria's top import supplier, followed by Belgium and India. The strong export numbers ensured a favorable trade balance for the country. Now let's head to the domestic equities market now, where we see a reversal from yesterday's positive sentiment. Investors taking profits in O&O dragged the market down. Inijon Mekwa tells us more.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Stock Market Report. Well, unfortunately, the NGX is back in the red zone today. 51 billion naira taken off through profit taken from the market. So market cap settles at 55.575 trillion naira. That means the Osho index dropped 0.09%, ending at 96,715.04. Our usual market mover is back today. O&O opened at 95 naira 50 kobo, but closed at 87 naira 50 kobo. That means 8 naira has been taken off each of those share prices. Let's look at the sectors now. Banking pleasantly back in the green, 0.64%. Accessco, UBA had some pleasant pickings right there. Consumer goods also, for Dangote Sugar, has been suffering some profit taking for how many sessions? Well, now he's back, and so we see 0.27%. Flour Mill and Unilever also contributed to that. Oil and gas sustains the sentiment, positive 1.73%. So while it's not because of O&O, it is because of Cornell and Japol Gold. They moved that counter into that zone. And at the close of midweek trade today, we see just after 1 day of recovery, the bear takes over again.
And that's it on business news. It's back to you, Ayotunde, for the rest of the news at 10.
Thank you, Will. It's the day after the first presidential debate between former U.S. President Donald Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris, and both of them were at the 9/11 memorial this morning. With one handshake and 90 minutes on the stand, the first presidential debate between former U.S. President Trump and Vice President Harris officially kicked off yesterday in Philadelphia. Here's Simon Pusey with other international news and around the world in 5.
Good evening and welcome to the channel's studios here in London with your international news around the world in 5. President Joe Biden has hinted at Washington lifting restrictions on Ukraine using US long-range missiles against Russia. If granted, it would fulfill repeated requests by Ukraine to loosen the limits on US-supplied weapons, which officials have said has left them fighting against Russia's full-scale invasion with their hands tied. Russia is yet to comment, but President Vladimir Putin has previously said such action could lead to very serious problems. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken and his UK counterpart, Foreign Secretary David Lammy, are in Kyiv to discuss the issue with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Any decision by the US could influence Europe and the UK into following suit. Mexico's Senate has approved a controversial judicial reform under which judges will be elected by popular vote. The bill has triggered protests and strikes, with demonstrators breaking into the building where the vote was taking place. Demonstrators flooded the upper level of the Senate chamber, chanting traitors in opposition to the reform. The Senate vote was the last major hurdle the legislation faced and had the backing of President Andrés Manuel López Obrador. Residents in the Vietnamese city of Tay Nguyen, some 80 kilometers from Hanoi, have been seen wading in knee-deep floodwaters after Typhoon Yagi killed at least 141 people. Some residents were seen rowing through the streets in canoes, while others attempted to salvage what they could of their belongings. Heavy rains brought by Typhoon Yagi have triggered deadly landslides and floods throughout northern Vietnam, killing at least 141 people with 59 others missing. That's according to Vietnam's Disaster Management Agency. There has also been severe property damage and disruption to businesses and industries. Kamala Harris and Donald Trump have met in a fiery debate, their first and maybe only meeting of the 2024 U.S. presidential election.
Yet again, I said it at the beginning of this debate, you're going to hear a bunch of lies coming from this fella.
They debated policy, but personal attacks also dominated the 90-minute event.
They're eating the dogs.
There were also some typically wild claims from the former president.
They're eating the pets of the people that live there.
Trump criticized Harris's record on immigration and the border, and also her shifting policy positions. Meanwhile, Ms. Harris said people left Mr. Trump's rallies early due to boredom.
You will see during the course of his rallies, he talks about fictional characters like Hannibal Lecter. He will talk about windmills cause cancer. And what you will also notice is that people start leaving his rallies early out of exhaustion and boredom.
People don't go to her rallies. There's no reason to go. And the people that do go, she's bussing them in and paying them to be there, and then showing them in a different light. So she can't talk about that. People don't leave my rallies. We have the biggest rallies, the most incredible rallies in the history of politics.
Meanwhile, Taylor Swift has endorsed Kamala Harris for president moments after the end of Tuesday night's presidential debate against Donald Trump. The pop star made her announcement in an Instagram post signed as Childless Cat Lady, a reference to comments made by Trump's running mate, J.D. Vance. Her post, breaking her silence on the 2024 vote, explained, "I'm voting for @Kamala Harris because she fights for the rights and causes I believe need a warrior to champion them." She added, "I believe we can accomplish so much more in this country if we are led by calm and not chaos."
She is a cultural icon. Something big has happened in the world in terms of the energy and vibrancy she's associated with, the optimism she's associated with. That was a big deal as well.
And finally, Pope Francis has arrived in Singapore for the first leg of his 12-day four-country tour across Southeast Asia and Oceania. The Pope was greeted at Singapore's Changi Airport by senior officials. Later, he was received by 4 children donning national costume, each welcoming him in one of the 4 of Singapore's official languages, Malay, English, Tamil and Mandarin. Pope Francis is expected to spend 2 days in Singapore. His visit will include a mass at the National Stadium, which the Vatican expects to draw some 55,000 people. And that's your international news around the world in 5. Now back to the channel's studios in Lagos.
France captain Kylian Mbappe has refused the French Football League's offer to act as a mediator between him and Paris Saint-Germain in their dispute over unpaid wages and bonuses for the striker. Mbappe claims PSG owes him 55 million euros, which the Parisians say the 25-year-old had agreed to waive in August 2023. Lawyers representing the two parties met early on Wednesday after Mbappe, who joined Madrid this summer, had referred his case to the LFP's legal committee. And Dutch striker Memphis Depay arrived in Brazil and was greeted by Corinthians fans in the early hours of today after he signed a 2-year contract with the club. Terms of the deal were not announced, but local media reported the contract would be worth $12.54 million. Depay had scored 46 goals in 98 appearances for Netherlands, but was left out of the squad for this month's Nations League matches. Five-time Ballon d'Or Cristiano Ronaldo has actually criticized Manchester United manager Erik ten Hag and said the club must rebuild everything in order to compete for football's biggest prizes again. The Dutch boss is under pressure after United's 8th place finish last season and 2 defeats in their opening 3 games of the start of this campaign. Ronaldo, who had 2 spells at the club before leaving for Saudi Arabian side Al Nassr, questioned ten Hag's mentality. An Australian Olympic hockey player, Tom Craig, has been banned for 12 months, with 6 months suspended after he was arrested in Paris for buying cocaine during the Games. Hockey Australia said Craig's ban started on Monday, September 9th, and followed an investigation by its integrity unit into his arrest last month. Though banned from competition, the governing body said Craig would remain eligible for selection for the 2025 national squad. That's it on sports. It's back to you, Ayotunde.
Thank you, Chris. And the main news again. Over 280 inmates have escaped from the Maiduguri medium custodial centers as the federal government began to evacuate residents of the affected communities in the devastating flood that has ravaged the Borno state capital. And the NCDC has raised fears about an increase in the number of cholera cases in the coming weeks due to flooding in some parts of the country. Confirmed 8 new cases of Mpox, bringing the number of cases in Nigeria to 67. And the Federal High Court sitting in Abuja has granted 10 million naira bail on each of the 10 members of the End Bad Governance protesters who were charged with an attempt to overthrow President Bola Tinubu between August the 1st and 4th this year. That's the news at 10 tonight. Thank you for watching. I'm Ayotunde Balogun. Do have a good night and please stay safe.